Welcome, friends, to another of our occasional On Further Reflections with Norm Allen, where I have conversations with people whose story I find interesting and nourishing for me, and whose stories I believe are interesting and nourishing for you. And today, my friend Mike Janzen and I are going to discuss his new Psalms project. It's a 2-volume recording. But it's not just the Psalms project that's of interest to me. It's because it's an expression of his journey out of darkness into light as part of his recovery from a concussion injury he suffered 5 years or so ago. I met Mike, as it turns out, about in 2003, where he was doing the music on a retreat I was leading for Little Trinity Church up at Muskoka Woods. And my regard for him was really, really high, just in his manner of leading us in worship and music. And I've watched with interest his development as a respected jazz musician in Toronto, and I've actually had the opportunity to see him play in live venues where he is the master of the piano as a jazz musician. And so we're going to explore his story and how the Psalms became stepping stones to recovery over the past several years. And so, Mike, welcome. Thank you for being willing to do this. Why don't you give us a little bit of a quick thumbnail on your history? You're a Toronto boy. You've been married for 500 years. What kinds of things would you like to know?
I'm actually a Manitoba boy.
Oh, are you?
Yeah, I grew up in Manitoba and went to school there, and I came out here in my 20s to go to U of T and to work part-time at a church. And then I just continued to stay out here after that. I thought I was going to go back like within a few days or at least a year, but I just kept staying out here. I loved it out here and provided some great opportunities for music.
And you're married and you have kids and all that sort of stuff. I know we don't want to talk about that sort of thing on anything that goes too wide, but just.
Yeah, I'm married for, I think, coming up to 17 years. Oh, wow. My goodness. Goes by fast. And I have 2 kids. I have a 10-year-old named Hattie and a 4-year-old named June, who sort of talks like she's from Boston, Massachusetts. So she's really adorable, and they're both great. The house is always humming, so it's lots of fun.
So for a person like yourself, the combination of a significant injury that didn't allow you to play music is a hit on a number of levels. You could make no income. You couldn't, it'd be hard to support your family. I mean, it must have been a very dark time. So tell us a little bit about what happened and what the opening stages of the recovery were.
Yeah, I've had some stomach problems off and on in life from a surgery when I was born. And so, I sort of woke up in the middle of the night, had some stomach stuff, and I thought, I'm just going to get some water. So I went to the washroom, drank a sip of water. I took 2 steps, and I've never fainted before, but I went crashing down, hit my chin right into the tile floor, and I passed out. And a few seconds later, my wife was sort of at my side, and she said, "Hey, are you okay?" And I was like, "I think so. I don't know." So I stumbled back to bed and went back to bed. Didn't think about anything, and got back the next morning and realized the window looked all foggy and the computer screen I couldn't see. And so I phoned one of my good friends up, and she said, "Yeah, you've got a concussion." And I thought, well, how bad can it be, right? Like, I don't know. Some people get over it in like a few days. The worst one I'd heard of was like 5 weeks. So I thought that 5 weeks sounded terrible, like terrible. Because I thought I had all these gigs. I think I had one with you, actually. I was supposed to play piano, right?
We had booked you for a Sunday evening event.
Right. And so I had all these things. And as a musician, you have to show up. You got to get ready for it. And I suddenly couldn't do anything. And in the weeks that followed, it just got worse and worse. I spent most of my time in the basement. Anytime I came up, it sort of felt like, when you touch an electric fence. I don't know if you've done that, but sort of felt like a jolt. I remember one time walking with my family, I wanted to go for like a 10-minute walk. I felt like maybe I was better because people kept saying one day you're just going to get better. Boom. I thought I was better. Went for this walk, and literally at around 7 minutes, my eyes just were on fire in my head, and I starting to get really dizzy. And I just looked at my wife. I said, I gotta get home right now. And then the next 2 weeks, I couldn't move. So it was a really, really intense injury, and it lasted for months and then into years. And even today, sometimes I still have some not great days.
And this, you had some hopeful signs of recovery, if my memory serves me, where it looked like you were going to be back, and then you had reversals, so that hope for maybe playing at the Rex or something was maybe going to be in the cards, and then suddenly it wasn't.
Yeah, I thought at around 6 months, I was going to see a great doctor. He had me doing these exercises. I couldn't listen to music at first. I couldn't do anything. So he, literally said, see if you can listen to 1 minute of music, see if you can play piano for 30 seconds. And over the course of that 6 months, I got better and better. And I remember looking at my wife and saying, I think this is over. It's done. But then my brother was in town, and we went to go see, I believe it was World Championship hockey. And at that night, I realized something was going wrong, and I was sort of sliding down a hill that I couldn't stop. And that began a whole long season of sort of sliding down, which was pretty scary at times.
So the Psalms project was something that was already in the back of your mind as a result of a conversation with our mutual friend Keith Martin. Is that right? So it was sort of before the injury, the idea of doing something with the Psalms was already there.
That's right. Yeah. We went to this little sushi restaurant in Toronto. I think it's called Fume, right? Is that right?
Yeah, I've had many. It's got the little sailboats that go around the center.
Yeah.
It's quite
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. And Keith took me out for dinner. And so when we were talking, he just said, hey, I'm thinking about, I'd like someone to do a project on the Psalms. Would you ever consider that? I'd love if you would do it. And I sort of listened, but in the back of my mind, I was thinking of all these other things, jazz gigs, and I had a symphony gig coming up and a whole bunch of stuff I couldn't get out of. And I sort of thought, well, this is a great idea, but I'm not sure when time will actually open up. And then it was literally a few months later that I hit my head, and suddenly I had nothing to do, and I couldn't do anything, and I just had to sit on a couch for a long time. And the Psalms started to become a real lifeboat for me to hang on to and give me some kind of words and prayers when I was pretty desperate.
So talk about that process, where the Psalms connected for you. I mean, you and I have talked before that I've had my own challenges with the Psalms. I love the Psalms and I use them regularly. In fact, I'm using your 2 CDs and have for the last 2 or 3 weeks, one song every morning to get me into my morning prayers. And so I love them, but an awful lot of the Psalms are about, enemies and anger and vengeance. And I don't have enemies and all that sort of stuff. So I had to learn that the Psalms were something that had to trigger me to pray for others who were maybe getting that stuff, having that stuff, whereas I may be singing something that's a little bit different. So the complexity of your situation, what was it about the Psalms that seemed to be the thing that you reached out to?
Well, I think just like what you were saying, the Psalms for me also were, I loved reading them. They told me a lot about who God was. And they also reminded me a lot of how other people go through really hard times and maybe what that looks like. And I'd gone through some stuff in life, but I'd never been in the place where I actually saw myself on every page or most pages. And I think that this such a big injury like this did that. I started to see myself sort of through a lot of the different parts of the Psalms that I didn't see before. So yeah, I mean, and it started off pretty simply for me. What do you do when you're sort of stuck on a couch? And I couldn't talk to people. I couldn't look at movies. I couldn't distract myself with my phone. It was basically no stimulation.
And you couldn't listen to music because your ear is so acute to what's going on in music. It would be a major.
It would totally overwhelm me. Yeah, it would totally. I tried a couple times, and I mean, what happens when you have a head injury or something like this? You start getting dizzy, start getting nauseous, and literally your head will not let you do anything of what you thought you could do. So, but the one thing I could do is I'd pull out my phone. I couldn't look at it for more than a couple seconds. So I started going through the Psalms because I thought, well, I'm not doing anything. I'm in a bit of a hard place here. I need some words or something because I feel like sometimes my head is empty or going crazy, one of the two. So I started going through the Psalms, and I sort of, look at my phone and just quickly try to find a verse or two that I could quickly grab onto.
And were there Psalms that you had in your memory bank that you said, okay, I'm going to go to, because I think Psalm 42 was one of the initial ones. So would you have in your mind, well, I know Psalm 42, I'll go take a look at it, or did you just do some sort of a crapshoot on?
It was a bit of a crapshoot. Yeah, it was a bit of a crapshoot. Like I think I started from Psalm 1 and just worked my way through, and then I would just highlight. At the beginning, it was literally one or two verses. I didn't make it through a chapter ever, so I just quickly scan a psalm for a couple verses and highlight those, and eventually I got to Psalm 42, and that was at the same time my therapists were getting me to do a lot of breathing exercises, trying to sort of calm my head down a bit. And so I started, looking through Psalm 42, which was familiar to me from my past. It starts off with, as a deer pants for the water. And I was like, I have a really funny story of when I was at camp. We used to sing it all the time, and we actually ended up hitting a deer when we were singing it one time. So, there's this whole story for me about that psalm. So but I kept going through the verse, and I got to one verse I just hadn't seen before, which was, by day the Lord directs his love, at night his song is with me. And those were the first words that were they were pretty critical, because I started thinking about what that meant for me. I'd breathe in like, by day the Lord directs his love, at night his song is with me, would be on the way out. And I would just literally hundreds, thousands of times I would go through my head at nighttime, during the day. And it would remind me, of God's hand, presence, faithfulness in a season where I wasn't doing anything. I couldn't rely on my gifts or how good I was at playing piano or anything. I just had to sort of sit there. So it reminded me, of my value, that God directs his love to me in all the unexpected ways. Maybe it was my wife, bringing me a meal, or my daughter coming by the studio and just sort of giving me a hug for a few seconds, or there's all these little ways and big ways, friends dropping off food. And my one friend bought a Valentine's Day gift for my wife. I just had a lot of stuff around me that I could be thankful for. And then at nighttime, the hard season where there's no light, it really carried me through those seasons as I thought of the words, at night his song is with me. That what's stored up during the day sort of carries you through the hard times as well.
So there's a sense, did you have a sense of the motion of God towards you? So you're saying that God directs his love was the line.
I did, yeah.
So you had that sense through people, through whatever, that the Lord was directing his love.
Yeah, and it's a great question, right? How does God direct his love to us? How do we feel it? How do we experience it?
Right.
Do we need to sort of have done something where we get positive affirmation back to feel that? Do we need to be in a corporate group to feel that? And for me, I think the regular places that I would feel that were sort of gone. But what I felt was carried. I felt held. I felt kept. And yeah, and that was the way I felt, sort of God directing his love to me, that there was this eerie sense of peace when a lot of things are falling apart, but there was this deeper sense of peace in my heart.
Now the sort of the mission of Touchstone is encouraging and teaching friendship in Christ. And so the whole business of spiritual friendship must have taken on a different dimension for you in the context of this idea of God directing his love, because we've shared friends, Hugh Brewster and Keith among them. But people who take initiative mean something different when we have nothing to offer back, I guess.
Yeah, huge, in a huge way. I mean, one of my good friends has often said it was so hard being my friend because he didn't really know what to do. I remember, he would drive in And really, he would spend maybe 10, 15 minutes talking to me. I'd go rest in the basement for half an hour. He'd still be there when I came up. And then we'd spend another sort of 10 minutes talking. By that time I was fried. And so he'd take off and he'd have to drive in.
And he wasn't offended. He was there to help.
He wasn't offended, right? Yeah. And a lot of people, I think the lesson that I learned over and over was when someone's going through a hard time, we often ask them, or I ask people, what can I do for you? But when you're really sort of going through a really bad time, the best thing is when people actually just slowly do some stuff, just sort of take initiative and jump into the holes. One of my really good friends would take my daughter to the park. My brother-in-law, I remember taking my daughter to go do pottery because I couldn't sort of spend much time with her for the first years. So people would just sort of take initiative, and it's really changed how I look at when people are going through hard times, sort of now what I would do. I caught myself last week texting a friend and just saying, hey, what can I do for you? And I was like, maybe I'll just suggest a few things that might be helpful,
right,
and just sort of go for it, even, if I don't get the okay, as long as it's something that's helpful, right? Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing that I've learned the hard way, that most of the time it's presence, it's initiative, it's not necessarily saying anything or doing anything. It's just being with the person in whatever way they allow us to. But I still, I could probably find places in the last 3 weeks where I've said, if there's anything I can do to help, let me know. And then afterwards, I just go, well, you're an idiot, because people often aren't capable of responding.
Yeah.
So Psalm 42, I mean, would you be willing to just, because this was the first one now, did it begin to be melodic in your head while you were listening to those things? Like, did music come to you?
Yeah, like being a musician and writing music a lot, all the way through the season, from my worst days to the best, there's records on my iPhone of me coming up with little melodies. And the main problem was I just couldn't be myself for more than a minute or two at a time. So yeah, being a musician, that's the first thing I gravitated towards. It was an easy way of remembering it. And as well, it was just helpful to have a melody going through my head. So yeah, I would read the verse and then sort of just listen, be quiet for a while and see if anything came to me. And sometimes a little melody would pop into my head that I actually didn't mind.
So can we hear the opening melody of By Day the Lord Directs His Love, the Psalm 42?
Sure, yeah, I can sing it for you for sure. Do you want me to sing it or do you want me to play it?
Why don't you do the piano with it?
Okay.
In the early days, I would sing this melody through over and over, and it goes something like this. By day the Lord directs His love, at night His song is with me. Sort of like a chant that I repeated over and over, breathing in those words in and out. Later on, I came up with this piano part. His love, at night His song is with me. By day the Lord directs His love, at night His song is with me. By day the Lord directs His love, at night His song is with me. By day the Lord directs His love, at night His song is with me. Why, oh Lord, why, oh Lord, why have you forgotten about me? Why, oh Lord, why, oh Lord, why have you forgotten about me? By day the Lord directs His love, at night His song is with me. By day the Lord directs His love, At night his song is with me. By day the Lord directs his love. At night his song is with me. By day the Lord directs his love. At night his song is with me.
That's great, Mike. And we'll have the opportunity to hear the finished product when we finish this segment of the video. But the balance there between the confidence in the presence of God and yet the questions about the absence of God are in strong juxtaposition. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
So Psalm 42. So then talk a bit about then next stages of the progress, because how far into recovery did you actually feel like, okay, Psalm 42 is more than just a very brief snippet of melody, to I'm now constructing a song, which on the recording takes 7 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It turned out to be a lot longer of a song. And the first part is more repetitive, almost Taizé-like. But then it goes into the verses, which are more questions of where are you, God? Why have you forsaken me? I don't feel you. I don't see you. I'm stuck in this hard place. And those were written later on.
But
As I was feeling.
those are really interesting because you can say, by day the Lord directs his love, and at the same time say, why have you forgotten me?
Exactly. Yeah, it's a bit of a mystery, isn't it? But what I love about the Psalms and love about that psalm is this idea of lament, or pouring our hearts, our deepest feelings, our most vulnerable thoughts before God. And the reason we can do that is because we can trust God. And so we can trust God with the hard stuff. We can get angry. We can ask questions. But I think what God's saying to us in the Psalms is, come to me to do it. Don't run off sort of, throwing your hands up in the air and saying, I'm just tired of this, I'm done. I think he wants us to actually come to him with that stuff. And so I think often in friendships in life, like some of my best friends are often friends who've gone through the hardest things with me. They've listened to the hardest things, they've walked through the hardest seasons, and there's a deep trust that's developed, right? And I think lament, or pouring our honest thoughts before God, our hard thoughts, that also develops a deep sense of trust with God.
And I would be guessing that it also develops a great sense of trust with friends. Like I've always had this feeling, like my dad used to quote how can you say you love the God you can't see if you don't love the people you can see? And it's in the Bible, so I'm willing to accept it. But my experience has often been, I can know that I'm loved by the God I can't see because I'm loved by people I can see.
Yeah.
And it sounds like that in some ways has been part of your experience.
Yeah, and I can't talk enough about that. Like, I remember one time looking out our house in the early days, there was actually a lineup down the street of cars lined up to drop off stuff at our house. Yeah, getting a little teary thinking about it again, but there's really thousands of times that people showed love to us in a deep way. And through that, you're right. I mean, there's just a lot of deep trust that's been developed because of that. This studio that I'm in right now, I actually started it right before I fell. And right from everything from sort of the drywall, insulation, everything you see in here was all people doing this for me, coming by, faithfully emailing me, phoning me, and just dropping in and not giving up on me, right? It's easy to give up on people after when they don't have nothing, when they don't have anything to give you. It's easy to give up on them, and people just didn't give up on me, and I'm really grateful to them for that.
Well, and it is an interesting thing that we discover about friendship is that, I often will say, people will say, what church do you go to? And I often will flippantly say, well, the people who showed up when my dad died is my church. So it's often in the places where people are there when it's darkest for us that we discover where the light really is. And it's pretty cool. So I think I asked the question about Psalm 42, how long it took before it became a fully formed psalm, and then we went somewhere else with the conversation. But how long do you think that? What was the genesis of that song? And then I'd like to just sort of talk about the genesis of some other ones.
Yeah, well, after the first melody was developed, I started, reading through the entire psalm and just trying to put verses in. There's a bridge at the end there that more represented the full psalm, and I like the chorus because it does lift you out of that place of questioning, of almost being frustrated, like, where are you, God? And then it reminds you that He is near. And yeah, the chords are sort of interesting, and so I decided near the end of the process to put a string orchestra on it. And you know how that was tough because of the pandemic. There wasn't a lot of opportunity to get 20 people in a room. So I was looking elsewhere at Nashville and other places, but we got a short window of about 4 or 5 weeks there near fall where I could actually record it. So about 8 months ago, I got a string session together, and then for me, string writing has always been something I've loved. So there's a lot of string writing in there in parts. And then right at the end, there's this sense of, yet will I praise you, even though things are going bad.
Right.
And there is something very powerful about saying thanks to God and honoring God, even though it's just not working out the way you wanted it to. And for most of us, including myself, it's easier to share the stories of when you're through the hard stuff, and now you can thank God for it. But
Right.
there's something really powerful about saying those words of thank you in the middle of some hard stuff when it's, life, work, it's just not going the way you had planned.
I mean, it's an interesting, I would say, an interesting experience that I've been through in my own journey. I have my own self-sufficiency capabilities and ability to push people away. And it took me a long time to realize that I would talk about struggles I had after I had figured it all out and come out the other side, and very seldom invited people in on the process.
Yeah.
And it was a big step for me when I started being a bit more open for help.
Yeah. Well, that's a really great point. I mean, I think we all tend to do that, right? Sort of keep it inside, keep it quiet, get through it ourselves. We can do this. We're old enough, we're mature
Right.
enough.
Right.
We'll
And
get through it.
you were raised in a similar tribal background to me with sort of the evangelical thing, which was very individualistic. And, letting people in on your weaknesses was not a high priority, at least in the culture I was raised in, and keeping problems secret and all this sort of stuff. And
Yeah.
so it is an interesting thing to get to the point where vulnerability is actually a sign of strength as opposed to weakness. But so talk about next stages in this process. So like the two titles of the volume one is called The Carried Words, and volume two is called The Lifted Songs.
Mhm.
So talk about the carried words and the lifted songs. Why is that significant? Because I wouldn't have immediately identified a big distinction between volume one and volume two. I feel like volume two is a bit more meditative, but that's just, I've only listened to it 5 or 6 times. You actually know about it. So
Yeah. And the reason there's 2 volumes, I started off with one big volume of 18 songs. And, I just kept trying to convince myself that this was going to work. It's always easier to do one album than 2. I only had one title, which was The Carried Words. And I just was like, I just kept listening through it and I kept getting bored. I couldn't make it through a song about 8 or 9. I was just like, oh, this is just so boring. No one else is going to give it. If I can't give it the
you
attention,
can't listen to your own stuff.
No.
Who else was going to?
No one else is going to give it any time of day. So that was part of it. And so my mother-in-law actually passed away in September, which bought us an extra couple months. It was a lot of feeling of grief and loss. But on the plane ride back from that funeral in Manitoba, suddenly it sort of occurred to me that this was actually 2 albums. And the carried words is a little more folky, maybe a little lighter in some ways. Instrumentation is a little more folky. It's got some drums and guitars.
Yeah, there's some more up tempo.
Or up tempo.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's got that. And it also is a little, the words are a little more of in a place where I'm being carried, as I was talking about before. And then the second volume is definitely more meditative, slower moving, a lot of space, a lot of strings, a lot of ballads on there. And yeah, the words are a little more lifting thanks or gratitude to God out of this hard season. So there's a little distinction there. The main distinction probably is one is more orchestral and one's a little bit more folky.
Yeah, yeah. So we've got to Psalm 42 so far, and we're how far into the 4 years or whatever of recovery that we're into?
Well, right now I'm about to hit the 5-year anniversary.
Okay.
And you know, at the 3-year mark, a lot of modern medicine would sort of say you're not going to get much better. But the last 2 years, both years have been huge improvements. Even this year, I'm about a year away from when I drove to my first gig after not driving for 4 years. And now I can actually like drive quite a few hours actually. And so everything just continues to get better and better, right. Which I'm really grateful for.
Okay, we've reached this point in the recording.
Yeah.
And we're going to end with the opportunity for us to listen to the finished product on the CDs. And I'm going to invite you to settle in, and as long as you're not driving your car, to close your eyes and to listen to Psalm 42, which Mike talked about, by day the Lord directs his love. And for us to take the 7 minutes of the song and sit still and be quiet and to hear the lushness of the music and the power of the words in a meditative moment. And so, Mike, why don't you just guide us into that, and then we'll hear the song.
Yeah, you're going to hear the words a lot of times. By day the Lord directs his love, at night his song is with me, which is intentional. The more we sort of let the words sink in, the goal is almost to repeat them so many times we forget that we're repeating them. So don't be alarmed that you're going to be hearing these over and over again. It just gives a chance for God to speak into your mind, your heart, bring thoughts to the forefront, and just sort of rest in those words that by day the Lord's directing his love in your life, and that at night, if you're in a time of night, that his song is with you, even if you don't feel it. And the verses are obviously questions. Why have you forsaken us? You can think of yourself in times where you feel forsaken, maybe something where you wanted God to be closer and he wasn't. You can think of others who are going through hard illnesses or tough times. You can remember them during that time and bring them before God using those words. And at the end, yet will I praise you, the idea that in the season that you are in presently, in the things that aren't going well presently, that you can still say thank you. And maybe God will sort of bring things to your mind of what to say thank you for. It's a long section at the end there. So there's lots of opportunity to let your mind wander into areas where God has done stuff. Maybe he'll even bring stuff to your attention that you've forgotten from the past. So I hope you enjoy it as you listen.
Be at peace with this music.
Directs his love, at night his song downcast within me. Why my soul? Why my soul? Why are you downcast within me? By day the Lord directs His love, at night His song is with me. By day the Lord directs His love, at night His song is with me. By day the Lord directs His love, at night His song is with me. By day the Lord directs His love, at night His song is with me. Why, oh Lord? Why, oh Lord? Why have you forgotten about me? Why, oh Lord? Why, oh Lord? Why have you forgotten about me? They say where is your the Lord directs His love, night His song is with me. By day the Lord directs His love, night His song is with me. By day the Lord directs His love, night His song is with me. By day the Lord directs His love, night His song is with me. So will I yet praise you. So will I yet praise you. So will I yet praise you, my God, my Savior. So will I yet praise you. So will I yet praise